All right, guys. So the trade deadline has come and gone. And if you thought the Avalanche were done after the Brock Nelson deal, you were sadly mistaken. The Avs, one of the most active teams on trade deadline day and really throughout the season. So let's go over all of it. Are we happy? All of that stuff. It's going to be a good episode. New episode, Locked On Avalanche, coming at you.
Your Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Avalanche podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Chris Maselli. With me, as always, Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. Thank you for tuning in and making this maybe your second listen of the day, because this is our second show of Friday with the trade deadline coming to an end. I don't know if we had planned on doing this episode. We really didn't, but with just all of the action that was really going on throughout the league and specifically the Avalanche, we were like, no, we can't wait to talk about this stuff. So let's jump on, do another episode. If you want to get in on the conversation, join our subtext. Link is in the show notes below. Chat with Kyle and I. We get your opinion on everything Avalanche, including these trades, and we share all that on the podcast. I don't know if we'll get to subtext people today just because there's so much to talk about, but they had a lot of thoughts. So probably over the weekend or early next week, because we're still going to be talking about these, we'll get the input from the subtext people. We will get to the Mikko Rantanen stuff. That is fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating. We'll get to that. And maybe some things that have gone on throughout the league with the trades, of course. But we're going to start, obviously, with the Avalanche. And how we're going to do this is kind of start from today, focus on that, and then obviously we'll probably just go backwards and just revisit briefly all the moves that the Avs have made for this season, because it's been active. It's been an active year, and it ends with bringing back an Avalanche legend. And it's maybe the least needed and least necessary move on the ice for the Avalanche. I think it's insanely important off of the ice, and they go and they bring back Erik Johnson, which was on zero people's radar. Nobody was thinking of that. And I think this is maybe some genius level of Chris MacFarland saying to all those people who maybe are upset with me, let me bring back somebody that you all know and love. This is not for he'll get some time maybe here and there, but I just want to get your thoughts on that one. We'll start there.
Yeah, this is a beautiful episode because this is the first one we'll end without talking about Sidney Crosby. And
I don't know,
but it's funny that is like every move that is made. Every time you hear the patented word on trade deadline day, hearing, you're always anticipating like Sidney Crosby, like the names that everybody has on their wish list. Like we had names on our wish list, we'll talk about in a minute, that did not land here. But for Erik Johnson to be the final move, it made it like you were pretty pleased with how this roster looks like after the dust is settled. And for that little thing to slip out, like literally as the deadline was up, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like, he's not going to come in here and it's not a game-changing move on the ice, but what he's going to bring to that locker room, what his presence is going to be. And you know what? Like, low key, like this is a C-Mac move of, I made all these moves to push for the playoffs, and we're going to do one more with Condor.
And this is kind of why I go back to, and there's a lot of people who feel like, the Gabe Landeskog C should be given up. And they feel like there's so much emphasis on someone just wearing that. And I don't buy too much into that. I understand it. And at this stage in the game, sure, if somebody wants to wear it for the interim basis until he gets back, we're this far into it, I'm not objecting to it. But I think too much emphasis is put on just having that letter. And I think more emphasis is put on stuff like this, stuff like having character guys in the locker room. Doesn't matter if they're wearing a letter or not. But when you bring guys back in like Erik Johnson, that's essentially bringing a captain into this team. He doesn't need a C on his jersey for people to listen to him or get that locker room in order, lined up, whatever the case may be. That's how you do it, not just removing a C from one guy's jersey and putting it on another one. There's some value to that, but is it a little bit overstated? In my opinion, yes. I think it's symbolic more than anything else. But when you do moves like this, bringing in someone like Erik Johnson and even Lindgren, who's a great locker room guy, even Brock Nelson, who's a great, like, that is what you do to change the dynamic of a locker room. And I mean, you can't tell me there's no downside to bringing Erik Johnson back outside of he's not going to play a lot, but even if he does, the endorphin high these guys are going to be on seeing Erik Johnson wearing the burgundy and blue again, even if he's only out there for 8 minutes, is going to be the greatest 8 minutes in the arena.
Yeah, I like I don't want to spend too much on EJ when it comes to like the wealth of the moves, but
right,
like when it comes, they're committed to Sam Malinsky. He's still here,
Hmm.
so like this is a good guy to bounce things off of for Sam Malinsky. Just like holding that decor accountable, because if you're going to commit to veteran presence between the moves that we'll talk about in just a second for that forward group, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to have. I mean, Taser is honestly understood as the universal unofficial captain. And it would just mean so much to this team and its direction to have EJ and Taze kind of directing it from like the back end. And that forward group now looking at it top to bottom, they have direction too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that was just a great bow on top of the gift for this trade deadline to get that right at the end. A big move that the Avs had right around that same time was Charlie Coyle, bringing him in from the Boston Bruins, and out goes Casey Mittelstadt. And you kind of thought with bringing Brock Nelson in, something like this could happen. And it did. They also send out Zellers, their prospect Zellers, and a 2025 second round pick just for Coyle. Is it a lot? I don't know. You do get Coyle for another year. He signed for another year. Their cap hits are similar. I think Coyle's at 5.25, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Millsat's at 5.75. So you're saving some money, and every dollar is great, but it's more of, what you're getting. And I think it's just, I liked Casey Mittelstadt, and I kind of feel like if they let him hang around a little bit more, maybe he would have morphed into what they were wanting him to be. But I think this is more of the Avalanche saying, like, we're not waiting around for guys. We brought you in to do a job. And if you come in here and we'll give you a little bit of time, but we're not going to sit around and wait for that. You saw that with many moves this year, and his time was short. You saw glimpses of what he can do, but he didn't do it enough. And the Avs were like, we can't wait around. The teams in the West are getting better. We have to keep up with the Joneses, and away you go. So he goes to Boston with Zellers.
Yeah. And we were talking yesterday, you don't want to be paying that much for a 3C, but when you're getting Charlie Coyle, it's a little bit of a different story. The last 3 years for Charlie Coyle, he's played all 82 games, which is nice. This is incredible. This is, for a 3C, it's reliable. And the Casey Mittelstadt experience, again, like you said, you saw flashes, but it just wasn't working. And even in that San Jose game that we were talking about, you're seeing him get moved off the puck. And now with Charlie Coyle, it's not going to look that way. It's going to be, and again, even with like Brock Nelson, and just honestly, the size of the pieces coming in, this is a playoff team. Like, this feels like it's a playoff, built for playoff depth, because they're sturdier. Like, even Lindgren, like, these are beefy guys. Like, you're not going to have San Jose Sharks moving you off the puck. You've got to fight. And Charlie Coyle, he had 60 points last year. I know it's a little bit of a slower start, but Boston had a slower start.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to see what Charlie Coyle can provide to this team, because I really like him as a 3C option. And you're probably going to have Jack Drury as your 4C. So there's your 3C, 4C. So I feel really good about down the middle for the Avalanche.
Your centers are solid.
Yeah.
From top to bottom. And you know, when we were talking yesterday or earlier today about what other prospects could be on the move, we didn't really bring up William Zellers, and I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? Like, that's a prospect I'm okay parting with, and that was really it. So you, like you said, you didn't give up anybody like Sam Malinsky. Like we said earlier today, we are we're big fans of Jean-Luc Foudy. So and that's just like, you know, I don't think he's really going to do much, but you just don't want to see guys like that go, because you just like watching them on your team. We're not really attached to William Zellers, so that's okay. But for Coyle, I think for Coyle, for Lindgren, for Brock Nelson, they're in the positions that they should be in.
Yeah.
You're not overextending them. And Coyle was overextended in Boston. Lindgren was overextended and not playing a position they should be playing on a top pairing in New York. So you're bringing these guys in, and you've tried it. You tried it with Mittelstadt and it didn't work out, right? So who you have now, like we're slotting these guys in, is like their designated position, and it's where they're comfortable. And God, like, I can't remember, maybe 2022 when they won the championship is really the last time you had just a solid team from top to bottom, and everybody was playing where they should have been playing. And you feel really good about that, especially with someone like Charlie Coyle, who's a perfect 3C, perfect. And he's great on defense, and, you know, he can push some action offensively. He's not going to wow you, but he'll make smart plays. Same thing with Brock Nelson. Will make smart plays, can play all over the ice, can do absolutely any position in terms of 5-on-5, shorthanded, power play. He can do it all. Like, we've gone from so many, well, I shouldn't say so many, but weaknesses on this team to, do they really have any right now? Do they genuinely have a weakness on this team?
And you know, and this point goes to what you're saying right here, to everybody who's typing away saying, "Oh, I can't believe we got another old Charlie Coyle's." Hold on, I'm going to give you this: Charlie Coyle, LOC, Ross Colton. That's your line. That's your line 3.
I like it.
I think that calms all frazzled nerves. Like, that's what you want to see. What Coyle can provide for both of those games in Colton and LOC. I am just salivating to see that game on Saturday night.
And even your fourth line, you have Jack Drury as your 4C, Jimmy Vesey probably on
Miles
your
Wood.
Fourth line, or that's what I'm saying, or Miles Wood,
Kiviranta.
You have
that's who my fourth line would be right there.
Who's that? Wood and
Kiviranta. Kiviranta's been having an incredible couple weeks.
Great. He's been great this year. He's been really, really good this year. So yeah, I feel like you're, like I said, you really don't have any glaring weaknesses anymore for the Avs. And that, you know, just goes back to, obviously we talked a lot about the Brock Nelson deal in the episode earlier today. And then you go back from there, you make the Ryan Lindgren deal. Also that brings in Jimmy Vesey, and then the big one with Mikko Rantanen. We'll get to him in a second. That brings in Marty Nishis and Jack Drury. And then before that are your goalie moves. So all along the way, when the Avalanche are having, a hole in the well, Chris MacFarland goes and plugs it. And for all the people who are just wanting him out the door, we did this last year, Kyle. And I know Mittelstadt's already out of the door, but when we brought him in at that moment, people were happy because, wow, we went and addressed the 2C. I know deals don't work out. Sometimes they don't work out. This is clearly one of them. What I'm saying is, when moves are made, are you happy in the moment? How can you be unhappy with the moves that the Avalanche have made today and throughout the season? They clearly have made this team better, and that is exactly what you want your GM to do.
And and we'll get to this in a moment. There's a second half to this that I would like to touch on, but it's not just plugging holes on this team. I feel like this was a puzzle piece type thing. Like there were puzzle pieces being, and that EJ move that we were talking about at the top of the show, it felt like the final piece, and it made that little click, and you're like, oh, like it was like, now I see. Yeah, I was like, oh, because like you look at that roster, like we were just talking, like Miles Wood and Kiwi Ranta on your fourth line with Jack Drury. Come on, like we would have been happy with a third line like that just a couple weeks ago, and now that's your fourth line. You have an established all-star second center, third center. Like this is a really, really, really good team. And at the beginning of the year, it did not look this way. Off season, a lot of question marks. We were talking about the cap. This team looks really, really good. And you're going to have to be with how the Central looks.
Yeah. And I'm wondering how people are going to feel who wanted McFarland out when he's nominated for GM of the year. How they're going to feel. So more to get to, a lot to get to, obviously. So we'll get that. We'll do that on the other side. Talk about Mikko Rantanen, because that was a big deal. We'll do that next. All right, so when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. How are my Knicks looking, Mr. Sullivan?
They're doing fair enough. I mean,
are they fine?
They're 40-22.
Okay. So they're coasting along nicely.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll start paying attention, and my paying attention is just looking at the final score.
And you have Alabama, Auburn for Saturday basketball.
Oh, another one, another match. Okay, we'll be tuning into that as well. So put some action on those games right now at FanDuel. You can bet $150 in bonus bet if you can. Or excuse me, you can get $150 in bonus bets on your first $5 bet. And you can visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, I don't know if you saw, they did some interviews after Avs practice today in the locker room. You got Brock Nelson in there. He said all the right stuff. Nathan McKinnon asked him a couple of questions. I give Nathan McKinnon a ton of credit because he just wants to play hockey. Yeah. He doesn't want to do all the extra stuff and answering questions, but he's very respectful when he does it. You can set him off every once in a while if you catch him at a bad time. But for the most part, like he just wants to answer the questions and get out of there. And they were asking him about the moves. And he had a statement where he's like, you're not going to win with young guys, is what he said. So, he's fine. And I love how we're at a stage where 33, 34 is old. And I mean, that is on the downside of an NHL career. I get it, but it doesn't mean those guys cannot be productive. And the Avs are going to have to hope that they are, because that's what you got in your acquisition. So, but it was funny to hear him say, like, I'm fine with this because we need guys. We need veteran presence. We need guys with playoff experience. And you're getting that. You're getting
that. I that's the thing. Like everybody's sharing like these old memes of like Nelson and Coyle, and I'm like, this is a good age for a podcaster. but no, and Nate's right. Like, look back at your defending Stanley Cup champions. Like, there's some veteran presence. It's not you just beat a young team, and look how good they looked. Like you got to draw the balance somewhere. Like I understand. Eventually, this team's going to have to get younger, but you can't moan and cry when you get rid of Mikko Rantanen and say, "Oh, but you're ruining Cale and Nathan McKinnon's window." And then you get Brock Nelson and Charlie Coyle and say, "Oh, we're getting old." No, you're trying to win the Stanley Cup in this window, so you can't have it both ways.
No, and he was asked about Mikko, and his demeanor kind of changed when he was asked. It's almost like. I don't want to answer those questions. I'm dealing with my team. He's not on my team anymore. And he was asked, are you looking forward to playing him? And he was just like, no. I'm not looking forward. There's no way I'm looking forward to playing him. But that happened. We talked about it in the morning episode where, there was rumblings that it could happen. All that needed to happen was an agreement between Mikko and Dallas. And then I thought for sure when I woke up in the morning, it was going to be done, and it wasn't. And you were hearing like, oh, they're going back and forth, and now you're just up against the clock. And I was kind of hoping the clock would run out, but it didn't. And Mikko Rantanen signed with Dallas for 8 years. And I had some feelings on it. I want to hear what yours are.
Oh, you mean signing the exact same deal the Avalanche pitched him, but in Dallas?
And people will say like it's the the tax-free stuff, and I get that. Someone made a point where what's he saving, like $500,000 a year, which is a big chunk of change. But I mean, we're talking about
at the end of the deal, he's getting $2 million extra. Okay. Big deal. And for everybody who wants to moan and say, "Oh, Mikko, you were my favorite," no, this is Duchesne 2.0. Like, if your loyalty to the team that gave you so much in a Stanley Cup, and why would I ever want to leave? I want a Stanley Cup here. If it's worth $2 million extra dollars, I don't care. Like, all of the warm fuzzies that I had for this Mikko Rantanen guy are gone. Like, you accepted the same deal that started all of this sideshow, and you burnt bridges in Carolina. Literally had a press conference, like you were talking with TSN and saying it just wasn't a good fit for me on and off the ice. Like, come on, dude. You don't say that about a team. And then you go to Dallas, a central there is no more love for Mikko Rantanen if $2 million means getting away from Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, everything you had being heralded as a hero, the big moose. No, you're a big other stuff in Dallas now, and you are now into the Duchesne camp with me.
You're like public enemy number one, or maybe number two, because you're in Dallas. But would it have mattered if it was a different team? Because to me, I don't think it would have. I think like there is just a big slap in the face that it's a division rival that you went to, and maybe no, I don't think it. I'm trying to think like in the moment here, like say it was like Chicago or something like that. No, I don't know if I would have been happy about that either. Like it's like
you signed the same deal that you balked and did not stay in Colorado for. Like that's what makes me. You could play for Seattle, San Jose. I don't care. Why is Colorado the team that gave you everything, where you were so happy-go-lucky and just a folk legend here, and then you're going to go sign that deal somewhere else? Like that's what really chaps me. Like it could have been $1 million more, and I've been like, okay, I understand. But the exact same deal? Come on now.
I know. And I've said this many times on this show, how I've gotten away from getting attached to players. I root for players, clearly. But I'm more focused on, like, I am a fan of the Colorado Avalanche. I'm a fan of the Denver Broncos. Whoever's playing for those teams, I root for them. Once they leave, I'm not the guy that really, like, keeps an eye on them. Like, oh, how are they doing? I don't. Like, they're not here anymore. Let's say they don't care about them, but I don't care about them all that much because my focus is on this team and who's playing on this team. But for Mikko Rantanen to go do this, to be okay, to sign an 8-year deal with one of your hated division rivals, there's so many questions that come into play, and you brought up a lot of them. Why was that deal not good enough here? I mean, you're saying all the right things, how you want a Stanley Cup here and you want to stay here. And you've obviously made a ton of friendships here, but what was it? Like, if you genuinely didn't want to be here, then that's fine. That's fine. Like, play out or do whatever happen. And then, go do what you want to do. But if this was your end game all along, wow, were we duped by Mikko Rantanen and loyalty, which is just a non-existent word in sports anymore. I get it. He's not the first person to do this. He's not the last. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt and doesn't suck, because it does. And for him to go to Dallas, and now you have to deal with him for 8 years. Okay. I mean, I'm not afraid of it. Bring it on. But it's just, there's some, like, it just cuts you a little bit. That I mean, this is like Yankees Red Sox stuff. Yeah. Michigan, Ohio State stuff. Like that's what this is right now.
And for it, like, did you just not like playing under Nathan McKinnon's shadow? Was it the Cale Makar thing? Did you want to go make your own way? Well, you're not going to find that in Dallas. And like $2 million to hey, by the way, Mikko, you weren't playing great in Carolina. You better hope you're playing great in Dallas, because they have you for 8 years and they're going to hold you to that $12 million accountability. So you have to pick up your game, because everybody's anticipating the Colorado Avalanche version of Mikko that we have not seen since you disappeared.
I mean, playing under Nathan McKinnon's shadow got him the contract that he has right
Exactly.
now. So he shouldn't be upset about that. I don't know why you. I mean, if you're feeling like I want to go make a name for myself, okay, I can kind of understand that. But if things are good, why upset that? And I don't. I mean, you mentioned his time in Carolina. He got off to a rough start. That happens. Played 12 games for them. I'm not going to sit here and say like that would have continued if he signed an 8-year deal with Carolina. Would have figured it out. They would have been just fine. But I think we're reading a little bit too much into the short amount of time he had there and the lack of production. He started to pick it up towards the end. He really did. He's a superstar player. No matter where he goes, he's going to put up the numbers and he'll be fine. To me, this is just, like I said, this is a slap in the face. And I think part of me wants to believe the reason why Nathan McKinnon had the attitude he had is because of where Mikko Rantanen went. I'm sure he's happy he got his contract and he got his money, but I don't think guys like Nathan McKinnon can be happy that you left us for them.
Oh, Mikko's going to be happy until he goes into the locker room and realizes, oh, Jamie Ben's here.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I was surprised though, because I put up a post saying like, I'm not, this isn't sitting well with me. And I can't just now, I can't root for Mikko Rantanen anymore. No. I can't. And a lot of people underneath that thread had the same feeling. So it's going to be very interesting. They're playing them next week, I believe, Dallas. Like we were getting ready for next year, having a Mikko return to Colorado, because you were not going to play Carolina again, unless it was in the Stanley Cup final. And now that moment is next week. I am really interested to see what the reaction is going to be. I'm not a booer. I wouldn't boo the guy, but I wouldn't applaud it either. I would kind of just stand there emotionless. But you're going to get a lot of people who applaud. Where before it would probably been 100% of the crowd going crazy. I think it might be 50-50 right now. I think, and it's because it's happening so quick after it happened, people are still going to be in their feelings, and they're not going to be happy when he shows up to Colorado in a week.
No, this might be my first. I have 2 Mikko Rantanen jerseys. One was given to me by an ex-girlfriend, and one I got for an ex-girlfriend.
Right there. Yep.
This might be my first social media burning jersey.
Oh,
thing.
don't do this.
Where you stand out the corner and be like, "You're dead to me." No,
Yeah.
It's one of those that these are going in a box. Like all loyalty, all the feelings. I still have a Duchesne jersey for all the vitriol I have for him. Like I still have one. This one was a different level. Like you took exactly what Colorado was offering, and you took it from the enemy with a worse locker room. So go right ahead, Mikko. You called your shot.
Yeah. And that's from a fan perspective, right? From his perspective, he's doing what's best for him. And I can't fault a person for doing that. But when sports come into play, all that's thrown out the window. All conventional wisdom's thrown out the window. And you did us wrong, Mikko, is the mantra. Yeah. And we're going to stand by that. But congratulations on your deal. It's a great deal.
No congratulations. You had a nice one, the same one in Colorado.
You did.
No congratulations.
You had a bigger one in Carolina. They were giving you over 100 million. I think it was like 13 and a half from what the reports are saying. And you said no to them. Wild stuff. So, all right. Where do we go from here? What are we expecting from here on out? We'll do that next. All right. So you're very likely your first round matchup is the Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. And man, like that's kind of unfortunate that one of those teams is likely going to be out. I mean, unless Minnesota just keeps things churning and somehow grabs that third spot. Or not churning, actually should say re-churn maybe, if that's even a word. But I think people are assuming like the way that things have gone down for both Dallas and Avalanche, they've made themselves better. Minnesota really hasn't, so they might fall back into a wild card spot. And your first round is going to be Dallas, Avalanche. Let's go! Wow, that is going to be a bloodbath.
And we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago on the show about the Avs just trying to get to the playoffs and having a different mentality. Now with this roster construction, I feel confident in this team and what they do for the playoffs. Before that roster, it would have been a first round out and then a lot of questions into the offseason. This one feels different. And honestly, like there was a couple moves for Dallas that you're like, okay, Winnipeg really didn't do much. Minnesota really didn't do much. Like they were two quiet teams above and below. So you kind of feel good about where the Avalanche are going. How much ground can we make up the rest of the way? Probably not enough to catch Winnipeg right now.
No.
But you can probably flip-flop that second and third place until the end of the race. But two things. This roster has to work for the Avalanche, and this new roster has to work for Dallas.
Nashville would like a word.
Yeah.
It's true. Like you like the moves, you like where these guys fit. Now it needs to happen on it. Now you need to see the results on the ice. And yeah, when Winnipeg didn't do a lot, they went and got Tanev, the one guy that we really wanted.
Yeah.
But when I don't really think they made any big splash type of move to make them that much more improved. It's almost like, do they really need it? No, I mean, if you're that far ahead of everybody, why upset it? Why upset all of that potentially with some big moves? So they go out and get Tanev, and I think that's a good move for them. And they're just fine. I'm fine when teams do that. When teams who are at the top, like we're at the top of the standings because of the guys we have. Why all of a sudden are we going to get rid of them now? Never understood that. So they kind of like maybe have that mindset. That's fine. And they're forcing the teams below them to do exactly what they did in teams like the Avalanche and the Stars. Wild, yeah, they made a couple moves, and I think that keeps them in the playoff race for sure. But when you're looking, when I haven't done it yet, but you're going to get those articles that come out that are who won the trade deadline, who lost the trade deadline. Avalanche are going to be in the winners section. Stars will be in the winners section. And you maybe have the way that people view it, they probably feel like Winnipeg didn't do enough and put them in the loser section. I wouldn't do that, but you're going to have the Avs like be quote unquote winners, one of the winners of this trade deadline for sure.
Well, I mean, I understand your logic in Winnipeg not doing enough, but again, Winnipeg hasn't proven they can do anything in the playoffs.
Right.
So I would have probably, as a Jets fan, I would never do that. Even with like coals in my eyes, I would never do that. But like I would have liked to see this team be built kind of like how Colorado put like an extra layer of armor on for the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked to see that kind of change. And like Tanev gives you a little bit of that, but not enough to make some headway in the playoffs, which Winnipeg really hasn't been able to do. Because when they get to the playoffs, they kind of disappear. Mm-hmm. So that's been their problem here lately. So Minnesota's trying, but they really can't do too much. Winnipeg, I would have liked to see them do more.
Luke Shen was their other big pickup.
Stop the presses
from Nashville. So I mean, it makes them better on defense, but again, not that. Mikko Rantanen acquisition, or Brock Nelson,
Brandon Carlo,
or even Carlo for them.
That would have been a really good playoff pick. But they could have got Marchand. Like
dude, like how is Brad Marchand only worth a second round pick?
That's another thing. Like that, if you want playoff experience, I would have went Marchand. If you can't tell me Winnipeg doesn't have a second round pick in their pocket.
Oh my god!
And it's not going to affect, like Boston's doing a fire sale. Cool. You're not sending it. You send him to Florida. You can send him to Winnipeg. It's not going to ruin anything for you.
I think that's because that's where he wanted to go.
Well, true.
I think I don't know his contracts in full, and I think I would assume he's got some say, and maybe a limited no move clause. But we never know what those lists are. but I'm willing to believe, based on
And it is
the
Winnipeg.
player poll that we talked about from the Athletic, and how nobody wants to play for Winnipeg, I'm willing to bet Winnipeg is on almost every player's "don't trade me" there list.
Hey,
So
nobody wanted to play in Carolina either, and we see that in full effect.
saw that. Yeah, man, crazy. So we'll finish up with this. Are you happy? Plain and simple.
I feel real good about this team.
I'm with you.
Really good.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to, you just feel like everybody's in their right place now, and we're not putting guys where they shouldn't be. You can still move guys around if you need to. You can still play with that first line. Bring Nichushkin up if you want. Bring Lehkonen down if you want. Bring Drouin up if you want. Like, you can still finagle little bits here and there, but for the most part, like, what you see is guys playing where they should be playing, and that makes your team better because they don't have to go out and do something they're not expected to do. I'm excited. I'm excited for this postseason. It's going to be fun.
And we're back to the Avs being deep enough that we talk about who's getting scratched and who belongs on the roster. Like, you're that deep now. Like, VC, does he get a chance to play? Like, he's like $800,000 player right now. Should he play instead of Kiwi? Should he play instead of, should we sit Miles? Like, having that kind of conversation means you're a deep team. And I missed those conversations from 2022.
Right. Yeah. You can rest guys if you need to on depth. You know what I mean? So it's going to be fun. Strap in. It'll be exciting. So, all right. That's going to wrap it up for today. So join our subtext. We'll get to our subtext people probably early next week. Let them chime in. So join if you want to get your comments read as well. He is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. I am Chris Maselli. This is the Locked On Avalanche podcast, and I'm going to do it, Kyle. I'm going to do it. We didn't get him, which I really wasn't thinking we would. Don't mistake me. But we are 24 hours closer, maybe till next year, Sidney Crosby being a Colorado Avalanche.
Don't start this for another year.
What's going?